Example 10 looks at the journal entries for the initial measurement of the right of use asset and the lease liability. In the example of Rocco Limited, the annual lease payment is payable in arrears. We will now look at how the journal entries would change if the annual lease payment was payable in advance. So assume the same information as above, except that the lease payment applicable to this contract of 2,400 Rand per year is payable annually in advance. The journal entries will change as follows. Please note the differences is highlighted in bold. The present value of the lease liability calculation will now change as follows. You have to set your financial calculator on the begin function because payments are payable in advance. Your payment N and I variables will remain the same, as well as your future value variable. But because you have changed your settings to the begin function, your present value will now be calculated at an amount of 17,671,798. However, the first payment was already paid on commencement date. So the lease liability will be measured at the present value of the payments not yet paid at commencement date because of paragraph 26. So the amount at which you will recognize the lease liability on commencement date will be this 17 million that you've calculated above, less 1 month's payment paid, 1 year's payment paid on commencement date, giving you an amount of 15,571,798. So the journal entries will be as follows. On commencement date, when I recognize the right of use asset and the lease liability at its initial measurement amounts, you will now recognize this at the 15 million that we've just calculated. But an additional journal entry is now necessary at commencement date for that first payment paid by the lessee of the 2.4 million. The 2.1 million lease component is added to the cost of the right of use asset per definition. The cost of the right of use asset includes all amounts paid on or before commencement date. The 300,000 maintenance component is recognized to a prepaid expense. It cannot be recognized as an expense through profit and loss yet because the lessor still has to render those maintenance services throughout the financial reporting period. The rest of the journal entries at commencement date will remain the same.